Good evening, and once again, welcome to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And since it's Monday night, that's right, it's time for new comics, bitches! So, I'm actually liking Mondays as a night for doing this because it seems that a lot of, at least, well, anyway, my point being is that some interesting news seems to come out over the weekend, and a lot of it seems to hit on Monday. Sometimes it's Friday, sometimes it's Monday. Sometimes it might be even the weekend, but rarely. Usually when there's a big con going on is when you get a lot of big announcements. But as far as comic news is concerned for me, and hopefully every single one of you, this news should be exciting. Now, this was something that was apparently announced back in October of last year, and I do not recall that at all. I must have been sleeping very, very heavily through that month or something, because these are two names that pretty much set off every alarm in my head for something really fucking awesome. And this did not ring any bells until today. David Aja put on his Twitter feed, he released some images from a Spanish website that indicated that it was 3 teaser issues from a new book, a new series, a creator-owned series, that's going to be done by Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin. Now, anyone who knows me, now the correct pronunciation of his last name, I believe, is Martin. Anyone who knows me knows that, of course, Brian K. Vaughan is one of my very, 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 very favorite authors. Maybe the best one, with the exception of Scott Snyder. And Marcos Martin is one of my very, 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 very favorite artists. And back in 2006, when they did Doctor Strange The Oath together, which is a fucking amazing book, apparently Vaughan just loved it so much and loved working with Marcos that they have been waiting to do something again. And this new series that they're putting together, again, very, very, very teaser-ish. The 3 images that they showed had just one word in them. Each separate image had a different word, but it was just one word. And it was, I believe it was in the, I don't know the order, but it's share, like, and follow. Which, I don't know whatever kind of clues that actually gives, but they seem, I don't know if they're planning on, because the look of the book seems to be somewhat futuristic in its, I mean, just the few panels that you saw, in the few images that you saw that are so brilliantly rendered by Martin. And I don't know if this is going to have something, either this is just indicating that, yes, they're trying to kind of reach through the power of social media, or if there's something that's going to be, that the comic itself is going to be something of kind of a commentary, kind of a futuristic kind of commentary on social networking and the evolution of it, whatever. All I know is that I am super fucking excited for this. This is very, very exciting news to be getting another book from these two creators and working together. Now, because I tweeted Chris Samney, I wasn't so much that I tweeted him directly, it was just that I mentioned in a tweet that as much as I love Chris Samney's work on Daredevil, it would be nice if I saw Marcos Martin again. Because he did do, obviously, some work in the first, like, 6 issues. And it would be lovely to see his stuff again. And he said that, well, Marcos is actually doing the creator-owned thing, but I didn't realize that it was this project, this thing that he's doing with Vaughn. So, wow. You know, Vaughn is the only guy that I've ever done, like, a profile of on my videos. So he's the only author that I've done that with. And so those of you who are interested might want to go back to my old page, the old Shadow Gallery, the Donnelly 92274, and maybe check out what I talked about at that point in time, because it didn't get a whole lot of views, but I kind of went through some of the stages of his career in the different books and so on and so forth. It was, I think it was about 45 minutes in length total. So, you know, just going over things like The Oath and, of course, you know, Why and Ex Machina and Runaways. So, if you're interested, you might want to go back and check some of those out. I might even find the links and attach them onto this video. But anyway, this week is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be blowing through, as we get to the comics, I'm going to blow through a lot of these. Because this week had its ups and downs. Mostly ups, thankfully. But there is one book that towers so far amongst, you know, above the rest of these books that it makes the rest of them almost look just kind of blah in comparison, which may factor into how I judge some of the books that came out this week. But let's go ahead and start, because there are a lot of books that came out this week that I read, and to be perfectly honest, I just want to get through as many of them as I can. Surprisingly enough, only 3. It was really the kind of the independents that I read a lot of this week. But let's kick it off with Marvel, as usual. Okay, so we're going to start off with just one of my least favorite books of this week, my least favorite book of this week, which is Wolverine and the X-Men number 26. This is the story of Dog Logan, you know, and his shitty life, having to deal with all the shit. And then, you know, he's tracking Logan, and he gets the time, you know, he finds the time diamonds, their time gems in the mine, and he goes forward in time and back in time and forward in time and back in time, just so that he can take over, he can be what Logan is and show James Howlett how to be a real Logan. And this just, it was like, oh, God, really? We have to learn about this fucking guy? I mean, because admittedly, yes, he did come out of nowhere, but it was like, you know, from the pages of Origin, which is pretty much a big red flag right there. I mean, Origin isn't bad, but it's certainly not that good. And yes, it's somewhat interesting to dig into Wolverine's past and whatever, but to have, you know, because I guess I wanted this book, I wanted this excursion into the Savage Land to be about the school, because Wolverine has his own fucking title, you know, so Jason Aaron just should have left this whole idea alone. And basically, instead of, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, Logan's going to be off. He's going to be kind of observing the kids, seeing what they do, and if they really get in trouble, then he'll be around to save them. But of course, there has to be a threat to Logan himself. But in this case, it's personal. So it's just like, I don't give a shit, man. I mean, I will say that one thing is that I really liked Ramon Perez's art in this. I like how it kind of switches between, kind of the comic booky to kind of an arty style, kind of like, pencils and just, I mean, it's just really, I like how those transitions work. But aside from that, this is such a nothing book. I mean, I'm so not interested and so not caring and so not invested in who this character is and what he wants to do. And just this book, it just felt tired. It just felt really rote. It felt like Jason Aaron wanted to take a break from this book or something like that. So that he kind of phoned this one in. Just said, well, I'll throw in something in there so that I can just take some time off and focus more on Thor or what, I don't know. I don't read Thor, so. But anyway, this was a 2 out of 5 at best. I mean, like I said, and that's for the art, really, because the storytelling to me is nothing. Secret Avengers number 2. So we have basically kind of the return to Galia, the kind of city-state that, or the country, really, that we saw in the past iteration of this book. And to be fair, I was kind of hoping that they were going to do kind of a clean slate with this particular, this new launch of this title. But, you kind of have to revisit the idea. And I'm glad that they did, because the idea of Galia is a really cool one. Because you have basically, it's a country for supervillains. It's where they can all come and kind of just either hang out or beat the crap out of each other or so on and so forth. So basically what the deal is, of course, here is this, is that Nick Fury, or Marcus Johnson, whatever you might want to call him, goes to Galia to get Taskmaster out. Which, of course, is very strange, because Taskmaster did a lot of trying to kill Marcus Johnson in the really, really, really solid Battle Scars. And there are so many different villains in this particular issue, and it's really fun, and, it's very cool spy stuff that they get going here. I mean, it's not a very spy-heavy issue, but when they do get around to the spy stuff, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Because the character of Taskmaster is really cool. I love that character. And, his own limited series that he had, the 5-issue series that he had by, I think, Fred Van Lente, was really, really solid. And I want more of his character. And, we have, like, these different, we have AIM is very present in this. We have kind of the resurgence of kind of the Descendants idea. We have, the other Black Widow, Yelena, is kind of a descendant now. And then we have all of these different, all of these different villains like, Mentalo or Gravitron, who are kind of these heads of state. They are the secretary for this or the secretary for that. And that's where the extraction of Taskmaster and then kind of reinsertion comes into play. So, I mean, Nick Spencer has crafted a really, really clever book here. It is kind of expanding more on his idea of, that this is going to be certainly not a more serious book than either Brubaker or Remender or anybody else's work on this title, but it is going to be more clandestine. This is going to be really about where they get into the morally gray areas. But the way that it's set up is in such a clever way and fun way that it's just hard to kind of deny how fun it is. And Luke Ross does some really nice work in this book on art. It's a little uneven sometimes, but I mean, when you have huge crowds, and Luke Ross is not really a super big melee kind of guy. He does faces really well. He does bodies really well. There's some nice surprises in this. I mean, this is just it's just a fun book. It's a fun, smart, clever book, and I always like those. So this was definitely a very solid 4 out of 5 for Secret Avengers #2. Alpha Big Time #2. So without really kind of getting too much into this book, because I don't know anybody out there who's really reading this. Now, of course, the main reason that I'm reading it is because Josh Fialkov is writing it, and I will support anything that Josh Fialkov does, just about. But basically, because we have, the kind of the cliffhanger, if you will, of the previous issue, where we left, it seemed like Andy had just killed this mugger. And he didn't. But he hurt him very, very, very badly. So he kind of initially tries to own up to the fact that he's just, done so much damage to this guy that he's being hospitalized and in a coma and everything like that. He tries to own up to it, but then he fails, and then he goes back to school, and you see kind of, the periodic mishaps that he has during his day at school, still being kind of the loser and at the loser's table. And you see him with his family, and you see him with the girl Soup Can, and then you see him kind of back in action. But then he's kind of, he's what's most important about this issue is that he kind of flip-flops between what he wants to do. Part of him is just, initially it seems like, okay, well, I do definitely want to own up to what I did and own up to my mistakes. And then after a few moments, it's like, after a few beats, of character, seeing with his, his mother and his grandmother and, his schoolmates and everything like that, he's kind of like, well, you know what, fuck it. I mean, I just hope that I don't get put in jail. It's not so much about his responsibility for what happened and more about, well, I just don't want anything bad to happen to me. So basically, Fialkov, I think, has written more than anything, more than Slott ever could have. He's written a very three-dimensional character in Alpha, in that of a pretty typical teenager. He's, very self-absorbed. He's very self-involved. He does believe, he's kind of the center of the universe. And, even with all this power, he's still getting a handle on the responsibility end of this thing. Because, he does, like he said, like as things progress, he does try and own up to it. But then, like I said, goes back to, again, trying to own up to it until he finds out that the mugger is going to live. And that's where we get our next cliffhanger, is that we are finally getting basically Alpha's first arch enemy, perhaps. So the expansion of this character that Fialkov is doing, and Nuno Plati's art is really fun. And just, the battle between, Giant Gross Guy, or Triple G, as he called. It's just, all this kind of stream of consciousness stuff that he throws in. He makes everything... Fialkov just makes everything fun. He makes everything better. He's making Andy Maguire better, which is basically a character you were designed to hate. So, that's a real step in the right direction. So, like I said, and every character seems very vivid. He gives a lot of life to the characters, even when they're in kind of small moments. even the his big buddy with the with the retainer and everything like that, who's always talking about movies and stuff like that, and just absolute kind of nerd category. He gives these small characters life, which is what the best writers do. And it kind of teases and tantalizes a bit, but never quite gets a full steam going. So but with all that being said, it's still a very strong issue. It's a 4 out of 5. Fialkov and Plotty are just doing some really, really nice work on this book. So I think this will be a book that probably some of you hopefully will get in trade when it comes out. And that's the other thing, that's another announcement. Fialkov is going to be taking over writing of The Ultimates in a couple months, is my understanding. That, I don't know, Sam Humphries is stepping away, kind of, thank God, and Fialkov is coming in. Now that would normally be great news, and it is great news, because Fialkov is working more than he ever has in his entire career. But the artist is Carmine Di Giamenco, who did the really not good art on Punisher Warzone. So it's like, but I saw some of the preview pages, and the art does look different. It looks much cleaner. Now, again, whether or not this is just a first issue and he's just having a lot of time to work on it might be a different story, because Punisher Warzones did seem a little bit rushed, at least as far as the art was concerned, but I certainly believe that Rucka really had that story in his head for a really long time, so getting that story on the page was just pretty easy to do. So anyway, moving along, Fearless Defenders #2. So here we now have Danny Moonstar is being thrown into this book, and he is another Valkyrie, but not in the same way that Brunhilde is a Valkyrie. And we do get, she definitely, throws some hurt down on the bad guys who are coming to get her before, of course, her inevitable capture. And Valkyrie and Misty and Dr. Annabelle, they are on their way to find more out about the Doom Maidens from the Allmother in Asgardia. And once they get there, it's all of a sudden Hela comes in. And, of course, Hela means something bad is definitely going down. And there's, of course, kind of a pseudo-epic clash between Brunhilde and Misty, and even kind of Annabelle wants to get her licks in against Hela, but that doesn't really go the way that any of them want to. And there is the introduction of Hippolyta as Warrior Woman. Now, whether or not this is supposed to be kind of a I don't know, I don't think it's kind of like meant to be like a middle finger at DC. I mean, Hippolyta is, a being of legend. It's, it's not like she just never existed before Wonder Woman. So to have her appear here, but as Warrior Woman, I think is a little, I don't know, the similarities are a little bit, I don't know. It was just, but what I can tell about this book is two things. First of all is that Cullen Bunn is having a really good time writing this book. You can tell. The fun is definitely there on the page. And it is written really nicely. There's a lot of fun banter. We have some kind of fun, the initial page, kind of breaking fourth wall to describe what's been going on before in kind of a Deadpool-esque fashion, but not as just off the wall. But I did like that opening, and I like the interplay between the characters, and there's some good dialogue. It's funny, there's Moonstar gets some nice moments in, although again, I understand her being in this book, but at the same time, it was like, really? They couldn't have found somebody a little bit different? And it is interesting how when Valkyrie does talk about, well, that the All-Mother, or All-Mothers, because there's 3 of them, but they are just called the All-Mother, they explain that Valkyrie was never meant to be alone. There should have been others. The Doom Maidens, are, kind of the worst things that they can be. And we do get more insight into Valkyrie's character as well, as far as what she's been doing as she's been on Earth. And she actually we have this moment of, she has pictures and screens of all of these female heroes, and, like, Wasp, or Scarlet Witch, or Storm, or I think Jean Grey, or not Jean Grey, but definitely Storm, Black Widow, again, a lot of female heroes, but apparently none of them measured up to her standards, which is why she never brought any of them into kind of the circle of being a shield maiden. So that was really interesting. So the book is really dense and complex, because it does, while having fun, it does give insight into the characters themselves. But the one thing that I couldn't get past in this issue, really, unfortunately, is Will Sliney's art looks terrible in this issue. For some reason, I thought he really hit it pretty well in the first issue, but it just looks awful in this one. It's like I was reading a review on CBR, and they're like, well, all the body types look the same for all the women, and there isn't enough definition. You don't really get the sense that even he knows what he's going for. He's just kind of drawing what Bunn has asked him to draw, as opposed to some other people who've worked with Bunn who definitely just kind of go off on their own and do their own thing, no matter what he wants. It's just, I mean, the most distracting thing, unfortunately, about Valkyrie, as far as visually, is she has, the 2 kind of, spiral, metal, kind of these metal cones for breasts, and it's just, it looks kind of awkward, and it really looks awkward in this issue. For some reason, that really stuck out. And it was like, I mean, both literally and figuratively. But it just seemed wrong. It just seemed off. So, but I will give it a 3.5 out of 5, because I did enjoy the writing a lot. So that seemed to remind me of something, but that's okay. I'm going to move along. So on to the Independents now. We're going to start with the Valiant. And Archer and Armstrong, number 8. So basically, as the old saying goes, the old quote goes, the last enemy to be defeated is death. Well, it turns out that the last enemy to be defeated is Obi, because we have Gilad, and we have our new Geomancer, and we have, of course, Aram, and they are, dealing with their various, with the foes in, of the Null, and we have some neat, kind of introductions to the action here, and again, we have some more trips back through time to meet more, famous people, famous historical figures. We have, Armstrong in the past. He's just totally high on hash. and that's fun. And we get again this global destruction, and this zero that is being counted down towards, and we even have the 1%ers who come back and make an appearance, only to be kind of intruded upon by Mary Maria, still alive. Interesting. But anyway, so we have that little aside, and then we're back to the action, and Obi gets hit with this laser in the eye, and figured, well, it must have malfunctioned or something like that. But what it is actually is this, because Obadiah is something of almost a program, this entity that enters him is kind of one half of the null. And it is slowly, in Obi's own mind, it is kind of rewriting Obi's programming and taking him over, as he even says, like a computer virus. So that when he does actually emerge, we have this kind of shocking ending in which all of a sudden the enemy is... I have met the enemy and he is us. Or he is him. And it's some interesting stuff. It doesn't quite have the kick that I want it to. This book's felt a little bit kind of, not meh, but it was a little soft around the edges. I felt that that Van Lente could have tightened the screws on this one a little bit more, because the kind of shifting is a little bit off. It feels a little inorganic, and the art also seems a little bit subpar in this issue. But overall, again, it's a good book. It's a solid book. It's 3.5 out of 5 for Archer and Armstrong number 8. Bloodshot number 9. Now here we have, basically it is the finale of this arc, and we have Bloodshot kind of, he is still, of course, his whole reason for assaulting Project Rising Spirit was so that he could find out who he truly is, so he could find out his true identity. But it is actually in this issue that he finds out something more important, is that he finds out his true purpose, if you will. Is that because what we have here is that, dealing with all of these young children psiots that he has himself captured and brought back to PRS when he was still working for them. We have, we see that through, we do have a somewhat kind of shocking death in this issue, but more importantly, what comes out of that is a very noble death, because what comes out of that, again, is that instead of being their pursuer, of being the pursuer of young psiots, Bloodshot is kind of divined to be their protector. And then, but also through this whole story here, we get Karetich, who is, again, this is one of the great things about comic books, is that you can have somebody speaking off screen and not know who it is until they decide to reveal their face. And that is exactly what happens here, because as it turns out, that Karetich is working for Toyo Harada. And the reason that Bloodshot has been sent to PRS is to break the young psiots out so that Harada can use them in the Harbinger Wars. Coming soon. Can't wait, can't wait, can't wait! I mean, so just, this book reads so well. There's, like I said, it has, some really very highly charged emotional moments. Again, we see Bloodshot kind of taking on this new role, or not necessarily being forced into it, but saying, this is what you need to do. This is the most important thing that you can do right now. So, and I get where they're going with that, and I really, really dug it. I mean, Swarzynski really wrote this issue well. Clayton Henry did a really nice job on art. It's an easy 4.5 out of 5. This is a big kind of introductions to where they're going from here. So, I mean, this is going to be, the next issue would be a really terrific jumping on point for those of you who are not reading the Valiant books, which is, I think, a lot of you. So let's continue on. Okay, so we're going to go to, we're going to go to Dark Horse. And we're going to start with Angel and Faith number 19. Rupert Giles returns. Sort of. Well, okay, we had, obviously, the return of Rupert Giles, but as a bad guy, because, you know, he had kind of sold his soul to Igon many, many years ago. And we do get some of those previous years as he's fighting along his grandmother, and taking them out. You know, he's in a disco hall, and they're taking out these vampires, and, you know, of course, you know, just the thought of, you know, and, you know, as Ripper says, you know, even the thought of hearing disco puts him into a murderous rage, because of course he's a big punk guy, and then we get back to the present, of course, where we have Spike coming in to help kind of save the day here from Igon. And it's explained why, because actually it was Angel who calls Spike and wants him to come, because, again, with him being a demon, he can't be taken over by Igon's mental control. So that's one more person on the table that can't be turned against the others. So then we have kind of the epic throwdown between Igon and Angel and Faith and Spike and the, you know, the Slayers. And, you know, some very unpredictable moments, because we get this kind of epic battle here, but that all comes down to a very personal moment, in which is we see the resurgence, the return of Rupert Giles. But he's in Angel's body. His soul is actually within Angel's body, because there are 3. There are 3 separate souls within Angel. He has his own soul. He has the soul of Angelus. And also he's now carrying around the soul of Rupert Giles. And he is all sorts of fucked up now, because they do defeat Igon, and because of Faith's kind of betrayal by continuing to stand alongside Angel, the other Slayers decide it's time for them to live their own lives away from these two. And, you know, it seemed, again, it was nice that it kind of seemed like Spike was kind of brought in to save the day, but, of course, didn't happen that way. But now we have these 3 souls within Angel all kind of fighting it out for not dominance, but just expression. Because we do see, at one point, we see Angelus come out, and we're like, oh fuck. And then we see him, you know, Faith punches him, and then he's back to being Giles, and he's recalling things from Giles' life long before, you know, probably around season 3 of Buffy. So, I mean, it's going back quite a ways. And even before that, we see him, you know, again, accepting, you know, the idea of going back to the Watcher Academy. So we're seeing Giles at different points of his life but there's still nothing to transfer Giles into because his body is still dead. So what to do? We don't really know, and that's what's so fucking cool about this book. I mean, this book, first of all, it's kicking Buffy's ass right now, kind of like the series did. Because Angel, in my opinion, was not a far superior, but certainly, while it was going on at the same time that Buffy was going on, it had it all over Buffy. I mean, I would watch Angel twice again before I watched Buffy again, and that's saying a lot because I love Buffy. But Buffy did have one truly bad season, and Angel had 0 bad seasons. I mean, if they had maybe continued for another couple seasons, like I would have loved them to, maybe they would have had a bad season. But I mean, season 6 of Buffy is pretty bad. But season, but there were no seasons of Buffy that were like season 5 of Angel, because season 5 of Angel is one of the best seasons of TV ever, in my opinion. So, just Christmas Gage really, really gets where, who these characters are, and, has their voices down to a T. And this is what bothers me about Andrew Chambliss, is that I've never felt that he really gets all of the characters, because there are so many separate voices in Buffy's world. And when Willow returns from her travels through Wonderland, I'm kind of hoping that she comes back here, because, like I said, I think Gage just has a much better grip. But she belongs more in Buffy's world, so I'm sure that she'll go back there. And I'm just really, more than anything, I'm just waiting again for someone to take over for Chambliss forever, really, before I go back to Buffy. So, anyway, this book, Rekha Isaacs, just, again, doing another killer job on art. A very solid 4 out of 5, edging more towards 4.5 out of 5, because it does get a little bit muddled and gets a little bit wordy at the end. But just where this direction is taking us now is really strong, and I think is going to be even cooler. Star Wars #3. Now this, I don't know if I even talked about issue 2. I know that I didn't do issue 1, and I meant to, but for whatever reason that week I just kind of, and then I think even with the second issue I still kind of like blanked out on that. But okay, this has been, obviously, what we have here is this book taking place between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. So it's basically, we have the Rebel Alliance. They are searching for a new base that they can call their own. And, because they're still on the run from the Empire, because the Empire is still pretty fucking mighty. And we have Vader is being very, very chastised by kind of overseeing the development, and, well, this, by kind of being ousted from the Executor, his kind of super Star Destroyer that kind of was his, and he's been sent away from the Emperor to oversee construction of the new Death Star. That is now his purpose right now, because he's in the doghouse with Palpatine. And we have, there is, because the Empire seems to keep getting ahead of, or at least catching up to awfully quickly, the Rebel Alliance as they're in their search for a new home, that that Leia truly believes there is a traitor in their midst, and so does Mon Mothma. So we have that Leia has kind of created her own kind of black ops team, if you will. Or kind of covert ops team. Not a black, because black ops means something much different. It's basically that they're assassins, and these are not assassins. It's just they're a covert team of, they're kind of handpicked by her, and that one of them may very well be the traitor. So Leia's very, in tune with this group and is trying to kind of keep everybody's head afloat here. Now, in this particular issue, we have basically some scenes between Luke and Leia that, of course, at this point in time, make sense. But knowing what we know, are still kind of, ew, man, gross. They're kind of like romantically interested in one another, and I don't want that. It's like, I don't want to see any of that. But again, I mean, there's the kiss, the very non-brother sisterly kiss that she plants on Luke when he's recovering after the whole Wampa thing in Empire Strikes Back. So it makes sense they would still have kind of this that they would, because they're both young, good-looking, and so they have an affinity towards one another. And Luke was kind of the, he's much more of a match for Leia than Han is. And of course, here we have, this potential other love interest for Luke. And, we get there's a lot of narration in this book, which is really cool because it does give us more insight into this universe and expanding upon the mythology and so on and so forth. And we get Han and Chewie on Coruscant, and they are looking into one of Mon Mothma's contacts, who is apparently they are an Imperial spy for the rebels, but Han definitely doesn't like the way that that's working out. So he has kind of a Greedo moment with this guy, but not even so much, because this guy doesn't even have a gun pulled. So they've got to fight their way off Coruscant, and again, Leia and Mon Mothma are really, laying more of the groundwork for where they're going to be looking for their next home. And then we have this guy that's basically stepped in for Vader's command and on board the Executor. And he is, the new TIE interceptors, they can match the INCOM design of the X-Wing fighters and everything like that. So they can match or be better than. So, they have new snub fighters that will, be able to take out the rebel snub fighters. So things are definitely heating up, and it kind of leaves us in this, well, there's certainly nothing resolved in this issue, but it's in a really cool way. One of the things that Brian Wood has brought to this series is that it's really telling a very powerful story about Leia for right now, and that she is someone that is very much not to be fucked with. She is, as it says on one of the pages, she is anyone's equal. She's flying, one of the kind of new kind of prototype X-Wings, kind of like stealthy X-Wings that they've had designed for them. And then we have, these scenes of her where we just see her, she's very strong. And that's one of the things that Brian Wood has brought to kind of this mythology, is that Leia, we've always known, has been strong, but, there are times where she definitely kind of seems to be the damsel in distress, at least in A New Hope. But once, Empire and Return come along, then it's like, okay, well, she's definitely, taking it on her own. So, she can dish it out as good as she gets it. So, but the other thing that's so great about this book is Carlos de Anda's art is fantastic in this series. It is really, really good. This issue itself is really strong. There are, again, there's a few moments I like seeing more of Wedge, because I just really like Wedge. And just, you know, the expanding of the mythology of this universe. I've never read any of the books. I've never read any of the other comics, really. You know, to me, I feel like, obviously, the only reason that I'm really getting this is because it is a book about, you know, it's a continuation of the story, or it's a intermission, if you will. It's basically, it's the break between two films. Now, when this eventually gets resolved, which I can only imagine it will, maybe we'll get, okay, well, this is what happened between, you know, Empire and Return of the Jedi. So, I don't know. But one way or the other, I'm on board with where this book is going. It's a 4 out of 5 for Star Wars number 3. Now, popping over to Image for a bit, we have Manhattan Projects number 10. And this issue kind of brings us back to why this book is so great. Because we have here, as we saw in the very first issue, it actually pretty much brings us back to the beginning. We have in this issue where the personality of Joseph Oppenheimer kills and devours his brother, Robert, and kind of takes over his attributes and so on and so forth. And we had, in that book, it was called Infinite Oppenheimers. But in this one, in this issue, it is called Finite Oppenheimers, because we have Robert kind of coming awake in his brother's body. And he is walking around his brother's mindscape and seeing, because it's very clearly delineated in the color work that's done on this issue, that, you know, we have all of the kind of Joseph analogs that he's created in his own head, all this myriad of different personalities from the past, from the present, from the future, and we have Robert, who is basically, he's kind of looking for revenge for being consumed by his brother. And so this is leading to the Oppenheimer Civil War. That there will be a war in his own head over who will eventually wrestle control. Is that, will Oppenheimer finally get control of himself, or will Joseph maintain kind of his own kind of supremacy as far as the personality itself is concerned? The only thing that works against this book and prevents it from being one of the picks of the week is the art by Ryan Brown. Because it's too much. You really get the feeling that he's trying to ape Nick Pitara's style a little bit too much, and that really works to the detriment, because whenever you get an artist that's really just kind of trying to ape somebody else's style, it just doesn't connect. Especially when that artist is so important to, you know, is so important to the narrative of this book. But still, with the story being told, I mean, Brown does a commendable job on art. And again, we get a lot of interesting visuals from this book. But again, in Nick Pitara's hands, this would have easily been a pick of the week. So this was a 4.5 out of 5 for Manhattan Projects number 10. Again, it's just another fascinating glimpse into this world. And my favorite issues, I think, have been the ones with Oppenheimer, kind of the story about him. So, just another fantastic issue of Manhattan Projects. Now, moving over to Dynamite for a few minutes, and that's to The Shadow number 10. I didn't review issue number 9 because I didn't get it until the last one, or until this last week. But this is... I'm starting to get a feeling that until Matt Wagner starts writing this book, this might be a drop. And that's really shocking coming from me. And I'll explain. because basically we have, we have the kind of tin pot dictator to be of the Spanish Civil War, this El Rey, and his lovely assistant who is handy with the whip, and we have Cranston, going in to meet with, El Rey's subordinates, to kind of explain, to have explained to him what the plans are for Spain once El Rey's side, which of course is the fascist side, wins the Civil War. And of course, El Rey, this mysterious masked man, knows that Cranston is the Shadow. And we have on the outside, we have Miles Crofton and George Orwell kind of bring the fight to them. So they're not going to stand by and just let this go down. They're going to trust in Cranston, that he knows what he's talking about, that he knows what he's doing. And that's really interesting. And the action in this book is terrific. And Aaron Campbell's art has never been better than it is in this issue. Unfortunately for this book, and this is where it really takes a fucking nosedive, is that Victor Gischler does not know how to write the character of the Shadow. Because he's quippy. He writes him as kind of a fun pulp character. The Shadow is not a fun character. This is not a fun-loving guy. Okay? Every iteration of the Shadow prior to this has been one of, this is a man who has a very clear idea of what he's doing. He has a very clear notion about what needs to be done. And he is not a man to mince words with, but he's also not a man who throws out little one-liners here and there. He is a man who is about justice. And woe to whoever gets in the way of justice. Because he's a killer. He is, he runs things kind of like a dictator himself. He is not a fun guy. He's not a fun character. He's a very relentlessly dark character. And that's what Victor Gischler doesn't seem to fucking get. And that's very, very upsetting to myself, a big fan of the Shadow. So, I don't know. I'm sure I'll continue to read it, but if the next issue doesn't get things a little bit more back on track, or if it's more kind of this, oh, I'm the Shadow, I'm this big evil, I'm this, not evil, but, I'm this big death-dispensing badass anti-hero, I'm more of kind of the, it's like there's really no delineation between Lamont Cranston and the Shadow. It's almost like they're the same guy, and they are not the same guy. Cranston is just a mask that the Shadow is pretending to be. And that's what he doesn't get. So, 2.5 out of 5 for the Shadow number 10. Because, like I said, there are some cool moments in it as far as the action is concerned. And Campbell does some really, really nice work on art. But just the story, the character of the Shadow is written very, very poorly. So on to IDW, and that is Rocketeer Hollywood Horror number 2. This is a better issue than the first one, which is not saying that the first issue was bad. It's just that you get the feeling that Roger Dandridge and J-Bone just really want to have a good time with these guys, but they really go much more in depth into the story here, giving Betty her own story, giving her something to do. As opposed to just constantly kind of fighting with with Cliff. We have some kind of a little bit of backstory into Peavy. We have, more of this, basically, with Betty kind of infiltrating the Church of Cosmicism, run by Otto Rune, and we still get some hints of this kind of his plan is that he's looking to rip a whole lot of people off for their money by saying by predicting the future, by saying, okay, well, the Hollywood dam is going to explode, so if you give me your money, I will continue to tell you things that are coming to pass so that you can avoid them. And of course, Cliff finds out that, well, it's actually Rune's own guys have set up this explosion, and he stops them in the nick of time. And then we have the Nick and Nora detective couple. We have the two kind of stooges for Howard Hughes who want the jetpack back, and Cliff constantly kind of hiding from them and avoiding them, obviously doing whatever he can to be the hero, until of course the very end, where we have the jetpack is taken, and so it's like, uh-oh, what's going to happen now? I'm still not sure who the narrator of this story is yet, but I'll be interested to find out. Again, it's really, really fun and entertaining, very, very appealing from pretty much all sides. It's just a lot of fun. That's basically the name of the game here. This book is just really fun and entertaining. It's not, there's no pretense that it's trying to be anything more than that. Obviously, Danders is having a lot of fun with playing with some of the archetypes and some of, the characters that we've seen in literature and in film, such as the Thin Man. But, we even have the dog, So it's just fun. It's just fun. And that, I would kind of like there to be a little bit more. I mean, that's what, Wade and Samney brought to the previous to Cargo of Doom, that there's a little bit more emotion in that one. There's more impact to that book because Wade is just such a master storyteller. So, and I think that's where this book misses the mark a little bit. So it's a 4.5 out of 5. Again, it's a really solidly written book, and it's really, Jay Bone has a lot of fun with the art and creating these nice pages and nice layouts and everything like that. So it's really, really terrific, but just not where the heights that Wade and Samney achieved, issue after issue. So now on to DC, Demon Knights, number 18. So basically we have the Knights are reunited. Jason Blood, Madame Xanadu, everybody is back together. The band has gotten back together. But there's a wrench that's being thrown into the works here because Jason Blood understands that the only reason that they want him is so that they can have access to Etrigan when the shit comes down. So he says, well, basically, hey, you guys wanted this, because he actually is jealous of Etrigan because Madame Xanadu does have kind of this love affair with both of them. And, she kind of loves the gentle side of Jason Blood, but she also loves kind of the down and dirtiness of Etrigan. So basically he's saying, well, I'm going to show you who the better man is. And, eventually you're going to want me back, and not just so that you can have access to Etrigan, but just so that you can have me. And so he calls forth Etrigan, but then refuses to return. And of course this, in fact, weakens Etrigan after a time. But the most important thing going on here is that the assault on Themyscira has begun by Kane's army. Just a scouting party that is sent at first, and we have Exoristos setting foot on Themyscira again after her banishment. And, you know, we have some really, you know, nice interplay. We have some, you know, we have a really cool action sequence between the Amazons and the Knights and the vampires. And it's here we learn a little bit more about Exoristos' backstory, but not too much just to give everything away as to why exactly her expulsion happened to begin with. But it does, you know, speak volumes about what happened to kind of her best friend, who is the Amazon that is actually helping Cain right now. And so we have the book kind of ending with the return of, or with the kind of the hordes of Cain descending, you know, via, you know, big ships towards Themyscira. So that's kind of where we leave off. And it's like, oh man, what the hell is going to happen next? Now, admittedly, we know that nothing really bad is going to happen to Themyscira, but it does take a certain amount of real oomph to make something that we know to be the case, that Themyscira will be safe, at least most of it will be, to, you know, and it takes a talented writer to make that still be tense. Now, this is a much, I think, much darker and more dour issue than we've seen in the past from these guys, even though there's some great moments with Horsewoman and her horse, her mount, whatever you want to call it. And so, but we have, you know, but that fits the tone better, as opposed to just being kind of, haha, haha, you know, as it could otherwise be. So Robert Venditti is really, really working this book hard, and he's working it well. So Demon Knights continues to be another really terrific read. Bernard Chang, again, beautiful artwork. So 4 out of 5, solid book. Again, another solid issue of Demon Knights number 18. Now, on to, certainly not the other books of the week, but the kind of important thing of this week, in which we will talk about the family of the Bat. And we will first start talking about Batgirl number 18. Basically, we have this week, we have 3 issues that deal with Requiem. And this first outing here that we're going to talk about, the Requiem is very much sidestepped in this issue. Basically, Ray Fawkes seemed to be just very interested in just telling the story of Barbara, and again, her, you know, kind of, again, her pulling off escapes and doing things against impossible odds, and then tracking down Firebug and making him pay for what he's done. And we get some really nice kind of full-page shots from Daniel Sampere. But, you know, again, at the heart of it all is James Jr., who is still, you know, not manipulating things from behind the scenes, but still is constantly calling Barbara with threats about, well, I'm going to kill you, or I should have killed you, or I'm going to kill our mother, and, you know, I'm going to do just all of this awful shit to you. And, you know, again, as with every good psychopath, he's always a step ahead. He does seem a little bit too mastermindy at points, but it was definitely like, what the fuck? This, you know, what the fuck is he going to do next? That's just horrible. And, you know, it's just every time that Babs thinks that she's got the drop on him, well, turns out that he's got the drop on her, or it's just more just him toying with her. Now, again, the cover to this issue does not live up to the promise, because there is really only like one, there's like one page of this issue that deals with the death of Damian Wayne, in which she first hears about it for the first time, because Batman has not told anybody yet. And, well, at least not told her. And so she calls Dick and, is very upset. And basically Dick says, I can't talk right now. I gotta go. And so that ends all of this issue dealing with Damien's death. That's it. So this is better than Fox's first issue, and I think this is his last issue. That I believe that Gale is coming back next issue. I'm relatively sure that she's returning with number 19. But again, this book, it does kind of trip up upon itself, because I feel like, obviously you do not want to have so many titles that are dealing with the same thing and have the whole issue kind of dedicated to that one thing. But it seems like, since this is another member of the family, that it should really stand out more. That this should be something that's more to the fore of this this particular issue than the back. God damn it, my fucking head. Itchy. Anyway, so this was a 3.5 out of 5. Again, it's a good read. It's solid, but it felt really hamstrung by the fact that I just feel that they really should have dedicated more time to Damien and his loss. So now on to Batman, number 18. I'm going to tell you now, this is the lowest I've ever scored, I think, any issue that Scott Snyder's written. Which is not to say that it's bad. It's a really good issue. But here we have Snyder and guest artist Andy Kubert, they are telling more of the story of Harper Row, who's coming back. And we see her and her brother Cullen go to Blackgate to visit her father, who has been put in prison, finally, by Harper's special friend. And, we understand that it's Cullen who actually wants to go. Harper wants nothing to do with this, but she's just going there to be there for him. And of course, this dad is a total fucking douchebag. He refers to, them as his two daughters, and, keeps calling Harper Harpo, and, referring to, their mother, who apparently died, was murdered relatively horribly. But once we get past that, the real meat of this issue, of course, begins. We see what Harper's been doing, that she has sort of crafted an identity for herself. She is kind of going out at night. She's been tracking Batman's movements kind of through the power grid. And she sees that he's been fighting crime during the day and at night, almost non-stop, for like 5 days. And he's just, and he's starting to slip up. He's starting to make mistakes. And, there's a moment in which Harper does finally meet with Batman to try and get him to slow down. So what we have here, and that moment ends not quite so well for Harper, because, she even, it's like, I've been training, she's been making herself these, all these gadgets. This is obviously a very resourceful young woman. But Batman does not want her playing hero. And it speaks very specifically to that when he punches her through a fucking, through a fucking fence and breaks her nose. And basically says, this is not a game. You should not be doing this. Go back home and do whatever it is that you have to do to stop doing this, because you are just going to get hurt out here. So what we have here, and this is where the book does get disappointing, is that we have basically the whole time that I was reading this book, I was thinking, well, not the whole time, but a lot of the time, especially with Harper's internal monologue, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this really is kind of recalling a death, or I'm sorry, a lonely place of dying, which of course is where we saw, we met Tim Drake for the first time, and eventually, how he knew that, the death of Jason Todd was kind of breaking Batman, and he had been getting more brutal, and he'd been kind of making mistakes, and Tim understanding that Batman needs a Robin there to center him, to ground him. Now Harper, of course, doesn't, but Harper, as opposed to Tim, does not know that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and does not know that Robin is dead, but just knows there's something eating away at him. And then we do get to, these moments where we find out what exactly, why exactly Batman has kind of been beating his way through the underworld, through these kind of, just basically street thugs, is that there is, they're like dog fights. Basically, they're being set up, and the dogs are all hopped up on venom. And so he definitely needs to put a stop to that. So we see it, but again, everything that he's going about it is just going about it the wrong way. It's the brutality, but without much in the way of planning, which is what, of course, she's observing. And when we get to kind of the coda of this issue, the B story, we get a shift where it's again, being joined by James Tynion, and we have a massive shift in art from the kind of super heroics of Andy Kubert to the very subtle and very more lifelike artwork of Alex Maleev. Now, I love Alex Maleev. I have nothing against him. If he had drawn this whole issue, it would have been obviously a lot less of a kind of grading art shift. But it would have, or again, if Kubert had done this whole issue. So really, when we do get this coda, we do get this really nice ending where, Bruce Wayne meets with Harper Row. Obviously, again, she has no idea who he is. And we get to see Bruce really begin to realize that this is a very smart young woman, and that maybe he should heed some of her advice. And, she meets with him to basically lay out some ideas that she has, and basically Bruce is just like, it's cool. Just kind of do whatever. And then Batman, of course, comes out later, and Harper meets up with him, and there's, a moment of forgiveness where, or I shouldn't say forgiveness, but apology, when Batman says, I'm sorry that, I did what I did, but I did it for what I think is a good reason. And then, he does reveal that, yes, he did, in fact, imprison her. He caught her father and made sure that he was doing time. So we get this moment, and then we get this moment where, she talks about, there's just, there's one word, and the word is resolve. She talks about, her own mother's death, and, that whatever Batman is going through, he has to have resolve. So she plays with the lighting of the Wayne Enterprises building, and the lights in each individual window end up forming the letter R. And, she says, I hope that will mean something to you. And we do get this fantastic image of Batman standing in the foreground. We have the building in the background, and him saying, yes, it does mean something to me. And so, we get, the thing that does bug me, I guess, the most about this issue, even, I can sort of excuse the the transition from Kubert to Malieve. But just that there are, I think, just too many shades of A Lonely Place of Dying here, that it just kind of, it feels like Snyder could have come up with something better, because he's Scott Snyder, and he's a guy that does a lot of really original work. So why couldn't this have been a more important issue, I guess. So, but it still works, and by and large, it still makes up for a good story. Again, I don't have the illusions that Harper Row is going to be the next Robin. This book makes a strong case for it, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that, if anything, she will become her own character. She'll become kind of her own hero. And that, in and of itself, will be cool. And I think, maybe would even be a decent sidekick for Batman if it ever came down to it. But I certainly don't think that she's going to be another Robin. And I think that kind of Scott Snyder has even gone so far as to say, no, she's not going to be. Which could very well be code for, yes, she will be, because we've had a lot of misdirection in the past in regards to things Batman related, like, Marion Cotillard coming out and saying she's not playing Talia al Ghul, and then here comes The Dark Knight Rises, and yes, indeed, she is Talia al Ghul. So 4 out of 5 for this issue. Like I said, it's a really solid, smart, and well done book, again, but just echoing certain things too much. And now we go to our pick of the week, because this is better than Batman 13. This is better than anything that has come out in a while. As far as everything the New 52 is concerned, this may very well be the best Batman story yet, and that is Batman and Robin, number 18. For those of you who haven't read it, and you know who you are, this is the silent issue. This is the Requiem, because we do, of course, much more so in Batman than in Batgirl, do we get an idea of, okay, well, this is the toll that is being taken on Batman by Damian's death, which is why I didn't really talk about it that much. And so, and I can kind of forgive even what they did with Batgirl, because this book says it all without ever saying a word. We have this opening moment in which Bruce is sitting there in front of the fireplace. It's dark, except for the light from the fireplace. And we see Bruce just sitting there, as the flame, of course, reflected in his eyes. And he is just sitting there, just looking at it, and then eventually he turns and sees Damian's kind of little cot, with, his slippers, his little MP3 player, and just empty. And we see this sense of decay around Wayne Manor from the outside. And then we see Alfred, who is not uncontrollably sobbing, but is definitely weeping, who is staring at the portrait that was being painted of the Wayne men, of Bruce in the from the first issue, essentially, of Batman, of the New 52, where they're all posing for the picture to be taken that the painting will then eventually come from, which is Bruce sitting in the chair, Dick behind him, Tim quite sort of to the side, and then Damian. And Damian's appearance is, I'm not sure whether or not it's incomplete or whether it is actually being removed from the painting. I doubt that it would be removed. So it seems like it was just incomplete, that they had not. So there's kind of this almost ghostly white over most of Damian's body. You just see kind of, kind of the upper half of his torso and his head, his face. And Alfred's just looking at it and just sobbing. And Bruce comes in, he grabs the portrait, he covers it up, and he puts it away, and he goes down to the cave. And he sees he sees Damian's outfit. He sees the glove. He holds his glove. And on his way down the poles, the bat poles, he sees for a moment Damian sliding down next to him, looking like, okay, we're going on an adventure. It's me and my father are going on an adventure. And of course he gets to the bottom, and of course there's nobody there. And we have blood running down the pole. Whether or not that, again, is imaginary, or whether it was just that Bruce has been on the pole, he's been gripping it so tightly on his way down that it actually has cut his own hand. That's best left to interpretation. And we have, after Bruce suits up finally and makes his way over to the Batmobile, he regards Jason's old uniform, still encased, and gets into the Batmobile and drives off. And then we have him driving around, just kind of looking for trouble, as it were. And then he stops, and he ends up, and he looks beside him in the Batmobile where Damian would normally be, and sees him there. And sees him just doing something simple. And he gets out, and he ends up perching on top of this streetlight. And the streetlight itself has no real significance other than he's just there, and he's looking just kind of off into the distance with an absolute kind of 1,000-yard stare. And he comes back down, and again he gets back in the Batmobile, and he sees Damian there again, and it's just there's no more. He can't take it anymore. And he plows over the streetlight, just totally destroys it with the Batmobile. And then thus begins his night of relentless totally, you know, just non-stop, you know, taking out of criminals. He's just, you know, he's just taken down left, right, and center. There is no one safe out in the streets tonight. Not the criminals, anyway. And then there's this amazing moment in which we have Commissioner Gordon in bed, gets a call, and we look up and he sees the bat signal is turned on. Well, what the hell? He's not there, so who turned it on? So he goes back to the station, Bullock's up there, and the roof of the GCPD, where the bat signal is just littered with tied up criminals, beaten probably half to death. I mean, there are at least 30 or 40 criminals there, just all tied up, ready for Gordon to put them in lockup. And then Bruce returns home. And we have, if you've seen the cover, you have this moment of Batman kind of leaping into conflict, just this kind of silhouette of him. But again, in the book, you have almost the same pose, but right next to him is Damian leaping beside him. And then he returns back to the manor, and he's getting his suit off and everything like that, and then he kind of accidentally nudges Damian's kind of locker open, and he finds in there a letter in which he explains why he couldn't just sit idly by and allow his father to fight Leviathan. And it ends up with, you know, him saying that, you know, it was, you know, that basically it was you who first kind of really showed me how to live my life. You know, it's like my mother may have gave me life, but it was you who taught me how to live. And this breaks him. And he just destroys the locker, and he is furious. I mean, he is just bloodying his wrists and bloodying his knuckles on this locker. He's just beating the living shit out of it. And then we have this moment in which he finally just collapses. And he takes Damian's costume and holds it to his chest. And the issue is over. This issue, yeah, made me cry. I get choked up just talking about it. Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. This is... I remember back in the 80s, and this was sometime around the... after Jason's death, there was at that time also a silent issue, but it had nothing to do with Jason per se. I can't really remember what happens in it. I believe that it is something to do with a kidnapped child and a dying mother. That I might be thinking of something else, though. No, yeah, I am thinking of something else. But there was another silent issue around that era. But this, and that was, you know, I think that was Starlin and Aparo, or Owsley and Aparo, depending upon when exactly it was done. Yeah, that was not the I don't remember exactly what happened in the issue, but I don't think I'll ever forget what happened in this issue. This is one of the greatest Batman stories, one of the greatest single issues of a Batman story that I think I've read ever. This will be absolutely on my list of one of the 10 best comics of this year. There's no denying that. This is an issue. I mean, first of all, Patrick Gleason is a phenomenal artist. The detail that he packs into this issue, it is obviously, this was a labor of a very emotional labor for these two, for Tomasi and Gleason, because it takes a lot of balls to do a silent issue. I mean, I've seen them done before, and I've seen them done decently, and I've seen them done poorly, but I've never seen one that has worked this well before. It is unbelievable. That, because you have to have a lot of faith in your artist to really just let the story be told almost entirely through just your visuals, to have no words except for that letter. I mean, just the moments in which, you know, like I said, the detail that he puts into it, the drawings in Damien's sketchbook. I mean, his, you know, even to the point where he's drawn the graves of his grandparents, of Bruce's parents. And the details are not what sell the book, but it's what makes the book perfect. There is not a single point of space that is misused or unused. This bravura 2-page spread, and that is very, very reminiscent of like a J.H. Williams spread, in which we have Batman, you know, his silhouette and the cape splitting, you know, where it has obviously its kind of openings to show these frames of Batman putting the hurt on these different criminals. You know, the fear that's in their eyes, the blows that are coming to their face. And it is, in a word, perfect. This is exactly the issue that needed to come out from this. Because whatever Snyder decided to do, whatever Fox decided to do, whatever Scott Lobdell decides to do, whatever Kyle Higgins decides to do, whatever Grant Morrison decides to do with Batman, and John Layman, whoever's writing, Greg Horowitz, I think, that's doing Detective. Everything about Requiem will pale in distant comparison to this issue. This is an issue that is, again, one of the all-time great issues of Batman, of a Batman comic that I've ever read. And certainly the best thing that I've read of Batman since before the New 52. And that's really going towards the end of kind of like, I think, I would say probably the final issue of Snyder and Francavilla and Jock's run on Detective Comics. Because that was a pretty fucking amazing issue in and of itself. But this is just, it's beyond brilliant, beyond perfect. It's 100 out of 5. I mean, this is how good this issue of Batman and Robin was. And if you have not seen it, and you even if you don't particularly care for Damian, if you just want to see a brilliantly done comic, pick this issue up. I mean, this is, you know, when there are other online publications that have nothing to do with comic books or very little to do with comic books, they start talking about how this issue is a masterpiece of storytelling. That should give you a good hint. Like the AV Club, the Onion's AV Club, you know, hailed this as one of the best Batman stories ever told. And they're not wrong. And it's a brilliant issue. If you can't find it at your store, buy it digitally. Just get it. Just read it. If it's not there when you go in to pick up your books this week, please go ahead and pick it up in whatever way that you can. Because this book is a masterpiece. Yes. So that's it for this week. I was able to get through all those books in less than 2 hours. I am going to be running a contest. I haven't exactly decided what the prize will be, but here it is. This is for my listeners, my viewers. I want you to recommend to me a book that you want to see me start reviewing. Give me one issue to start with. It has to be an upcoming issue. So basically, I'm very much doing this off the cuff, but I had kind of planned this. It sounded better in my head than it does now. I might rethink this, but for right now, the contest will be, and you will receive a prize, no matter where you are in the world. And that will be, introduce me to a comic that I'm not reading. And make me love it. It has to be an ongoing book. It can be any publisher. I will promise I will try and find it as best I can. If I can't get it in paper, I will try and get it digitally. But recommend to me an ongoing or a recently finished book, and whatever the best recommendation is, whatever book that I like the most. Now, bear in mind, this is me talking to you. So you kind of have to suggest a book that will be to my tastes. You know what I like. I read a lot of different books, but you know what I really love. And of course I will let you know if I've read it before. Those of you who have followed me as long as you have, you know pretty much what I do read, what I have read, what I have loved, what I haven't loved. So to you, Matt, don't recommend Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, okay? Just because it's a little old. And I did really enjoy the trade that you sent me, so thank you again for that. And again, thank you for Sandman. That really turned me on to it, and I'm waiting on another trade as we speak. I bought a whole kind of slew of trades recently that I don't actually understand why I haven't gotten them yet. But, you know, because I'm getting the second trade of iVampire soon. I'm getting the second book of Sandman. I'm getting I don't know why the hell I didn't pre-order Cargo of Doom, Rocketeer, but I'm getting that. I'm getting the book of the actual initial Rocketeer run from Dave Stevens. Finally getting that. I'm getting the new reprint of The Shadow, Blood, and Judgment by Howard Chaykin. But anyway, these are all things that, you know, again, I'm not trying to recommend things. I'm just saying, something I don't read and something that you think that I will really love and that I'll really get off on, that I'm not already reading, obviously. So to those, to whatever book it is that gives me the biggest, kind of, comic chubby, then I will send you a prize. And like I said, that prize is yet to be determined, but it will be cool and it will be hard to get. So, comments below about the video that you just saw, and also include in there comments about what you would like to see me read and review for you. Again, make it something that I can find easily, relatively easily, and I will do my best to start reading it. So until then, that pretty much wraps it up for the Shadow Gallery and for New Comics, bitches! So thank you again for watching. Jesus Christ. Okay, so yeah, hit me up with that stuff. If you don't already follow me on Twitter, that's @Donnelly92274. Most of you who watch this or listen to this on a regular basis do already follow me. But, I want you to follow me so that I can follow you back. Those of you who can't find me on Facebook or aren't my Facebook friends, I could always use another friend for Marvel Avengers Alliance, because that's a fun fucking game. I don't know how much money I've spent. Not that much. Probably spent about $50 on it getting gold. But it's, I'm not really buying a whole lot of video games right now, and I played that game every day. So it's worth it to spend money on it. For those of you who do play it, the Punisher is a fucking awesome character to get. Captain Britain is a totally awesome character to get. I just love having Captain Britain in a game. That's just so cool to me. But anyway, and if you are playing that, I know that Mark, Ghost Critic, I know that you're playing it, so thank you for that. Send me unstable ISO 8s so that I can continue this. I don't really want Hank Pym. Don't really care, but I do want to get all the weapons that come with him. So anyway, so thanks again for watching. I'm going to let you go now. So obviously like it, dislike it, thumb it up, thumb it down. Comments, please. That's where the meat and potatoes really is. So again, thank you for watching. It's obviously been another long one, but this could have been easily broken up into 2 segments if I decided to do full reviews of every title and didn't stop periodically to talk about kind of not off-topic things, but just whatever, ancillary things. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I'm James Donnelly. You're leaving the Shadow Gallery. And as always, I will remind you to forever stay in the shadows.